welcome all of you here in a nice building where we have, if my information is correct, the last forum on the way to Antarctica, what Admiral Bellingshausen is organizing, or expedition crew behind it. And as they say, last but not the least, it's very right thing in this subject we are going to cover this forum today, because it is probably the most ambitious, critical, decisive subject of all of what we have covered since then, and concerns climate change and ocean. These two are closely linked, as we know. In fact, ocean is in the central place of the climate change. And before we go to today's speakers, we have 3 speakers altogether. We start with climate change in general, looking some of the facts and the reality what we are facing today. And then we go further into details, looking more deeper into the oceans and what kind of changes we can see there. But before I give a word to our speakers, I would like to say some words about the project behind it and what is the real reason why we are here today. Next year is an important year in Antarctic history. The world will commemorate 200 years of the discovery of the white continent. And arguably, the first, or at least one of the first, to see this frozen continent was Estonian-born Fabian Gottlieb von Bellingshausen. At this time, he was serving Russian Navy. He was Baltic-German naval officer. And the idea to organize the first Russian South Polar expedition initially actually came from French descent in Russia. Marquis de Traversy, who at this time served as Minister of the Imperial Russian Navy. That idea captured the attention, and the expedition was organized with the main goal to reach as far south as possible. Hopefully further south than James Cook had done it before. And if possible, because at the time no one really knew what's laying really down there in the middle of the Southern Ocean. So the aim was, if possible, to reach all the way to the South Pole. There were, from antique times already, hopes that there must be a continent. But after James Cook expeditions, actually, this area became even more about surrounded more about the Taubes and Cook, as he didn't see any land, he wasn't anymore sure that there is land at all. So actually the map was the proposed continent on the maps at this time after Cook expeditions were more or less wiped. And Bellingshausen succeeded in the mean that in 1820, as you see on this map, which presents Bellingshausen route to Antarctica and around the world, he probably noticed Antarctic continent already in the end of the January at this point. Today, now, of course, Estonians have a will to somehow celebrate that event and rise raise the awareness about issues which are surrounding this continent linked with the climate change and changes in the global ocean. So, due to this reason, Estonian Maritime Museum and the NGO Thetis Expeditions, they organized, with the help of the private and public sector, an expedition on board of Admiral Bellingshausen. The ship is named after the famous admiral, to retrace this route what Bellingshausen had to the Antarctica. And it is not just a sea journey for fun, but it also has some mission to carry on. With this expedition, we want to raise the public awareness about climate change issues, as I mentioned, also the ocean, which man has polluted, and climate change even further worsened the conditions there. We also highlight some of the importances of the polar regions, which are actually the front line in the climate change, and the signs are most visible in these regions. So probably we are actually talking about the challenge, the most challenging issue what mankind has ever had. Now we are in France, in Brest. Although Bellingshausen originally, as you can see on the route here, didn't have a stopover in France. But for our scientific forum, focusing on science and ocean, came from the idea to organize it in France from a couple of simple facts. First of all, France is one of the forerunners in modern climate change fight. One of the countries which is most ambitious, raising the pledges and commitments to move towards the carbon neutral future. That was one reason. And after all, we know that today's the most successful climate agreement was signed in Paris, in France, what we have at the moment. The second reason brings me to such an organization as Star Ocean Foundation. It is France-based, and it is remarkably unique, privately funded environmental foundation which is mostly developed and dedicated to the ocean. I have a very personal touch with this foundation. Tara as a schooner, which is in the middle of this foundation research vessel, and serves as for the different projects as a unique scientific platform or floating laboratory, has a very special place in my heart. Because I, back in 2007, participated in one of her journeys, which was Arctic drift. It took 1.5 years when we drifted in the middle of the sea ice, trapped by the ice all over the Arctic Ocean. So I'm very pleased that today we have one speaker from Tara Ocean Foundation, and they bring us their valuable input into this forum with their own experience, what they have a lot. So let's go to the presentations now. Enough for the introduction. So we have 3 speakers today. 2 of them will give us a more specific look on climate change, as I mentioned, from the ocean perspective. And the one, actually, the presentation which is the first one, and we bring first to you, is focusing on climate change. I would say the climate change as a scientific subject has a lot changed over the time, because when it first emerged as an purely environmental issue many years ago, it was quite far distant for common persons at the street. But it became more and more an existential matter. It became more and more involved in our everyday life. It was involving politics, economy, social services, human rights, for instance, and so on. So it is really now part of our everyday life. For instance, on the creation of IPCC, which is the International Panel on Climate Change, scientific papers which were published in 1 year remarkably rose, and they are reached nowadays about 15,000 papers in the scientific magazines, which is a huge amount which is published. Luckily, our first speaker, there is one problem also today, that in this myriad of the climate opinions and debates and subjective arguments, we are actually starting to lose the real scientific facts, and it's hard to distinguish them. It's getting harder and harder to distinguish them from half truths and just opinions.